Hey everyone, it's Ben Hardy here, and in today's video, we'll be comparing the 2022 Hyundai Palisade to the 2023 Hyundai Palisade, so you guys can see what actually changed between the old Palisade and the new one. Before getting into the video though, as always, if you want to save time and money the next time you purchase a car, link to my car buying guide in the description down below. Let's get right into the video. Starting things off under the hood of the Palisade, we have a naturally aspirated 3.8 liter V6 that goes through an 8-speed automatic transmission. It is good for 291 horsepower at 6,000 RPMs and then 262 pound-feet of torque at 5,200 RPMs. Pretty typical for a V6. And guess what? The new one has the exact same powertrain, so we don't need to go into the hood of that one. Now, going over the front end of the 2022, just pay attention to a lot of the key features like here on the hood. You guys can see with that one body line how it kind of like just ends right there, and then pay special attention here to the lights in terms of the design, right, with the daytime running lights and then with the headlight cluster, that whole section right there. And then you guys can see with the parking sensors on the front end, and then notice here with the silver trim and also the blacked out trim as well, kind of like the overall design there with the Palisade. And again, pretty striking overall, that is for sure. Even to this day, it's definitely just always a strange looking vehicle to see going down the road. Like it definitely has a unique presence, that is for sure. But yeah, that's the front end of the previous version. And what you guys notice, the stalks are different for the lights. Now look at the front end of the new version. What you guys will notice here first with the hood is not really changed. But coming down to the light area, this is where things change drastically. You guys can see, I shouldn't say drastically, but it's definitely an evolution of the lights from a daytime running light perspective than, you know, a little bit the headlights. And then same thing with the front grille, right? That looks quite a bit different as well. And again, that's one of the biggest differentiating factors is the front end here with the new Palisade, to basically show you this is a new one versus the old one. And of course the light stock, right? Because it's different with both of them. Now popping over here to the tire and wheel setup, this is something that also has actually changed quite a bit between both of them, as you guys will see in a little bit. But I noticed the wheel design pretty wacky, that is for sure. There's a lot going on. I was actually a fan of these wheels. Some people say they didn't really like it, but I thought it was just kind of cool and just different, basically. Because again, you just don't usually see wheels like that on a car straight from the factory. And so I don't know, I thought it was definitely something that's just cool overall. Notice there with the whole fender setup in terms of everything being body painted. Then you guys can see the kind of silver trim there off to the side. And again, pay attention here to kind of, well, first up, little lights there on the mirrors. And then you got the rails at the top. Now notice the trim on the door handles. Pay special attention to that. And then also the window trim. Notice how you've got the line there on the top and then the line there on the bottom that's silver in coloration on the side there. Now, notice here with the new Palisade, the wheels are a lot more normal. So maybe people complained about the calligraphy wheels for the previous version. And so Hyundai's like, oh, I guess we got to do normal wheels, because these are pretty dang normal, if you ask me. And then you guys can see here with the whole fender flare setup and everything, how that's all body painted. And notice a lot of the stuff here on the side is pretty similar, but notice with the silver trim around the windows, completely different areas, right? So that looks, it makes it look a little bit different from the side, but you still have those little lights there on the mirror. So again, a lot of stuff carried over, but if you look close, you can see the differences. Now this is the key fob for the previous version of the Palisade. You guys can see the functionality on the key fob and also the shape of the key fob as well, which is pretty cool. And then obviously, you know, like most modern SUVs, you can just press a button to pop the hatch, which is definitely a nice feature. And then notice here with the storage space in the rear, you guys can see there with the little metallic plaques. And then notice underneath with the storage as well. And then you guys can see all the seat controls here with the speakers for the sound system. But also those allow you to basically raise and lower the third row and then just lower the second row seats. So definitely a nice little luxury feature to have on just pretty much any third row SUV. I can't wait until we can have power fold up second row seating with SUVs. I know, one more thing to break, but in the name of luxury, that is what is most important. And Going from that to the rear of the previous version of the Palisade, this is where you guys probably won't notice as many differences between both of them. So again, this is the 2022. You can see here with the taillight design that they've gone for. And of course, we always have to have the H-Track badge to let everyone know that you got the all-wheel drive system. Got the 2 exhaust tips there on the side. Now notice here, different key fob. And we have self-park now with the new Palisade. So that's another difference between them. Again, different key fob and a little extra feature. So the key fob is definitely a lot busier in terms of how much stuff that it has on it, which is kind of interesting. And then aside from that, the rear hatch area is identical, so I didn't feel like wasting your guys' time with that. But notice here with the kind of like taillight design, again, looks like a lot of stuff's been carried over here with the rear end, including those little exhaust tips there at the bottom. Got that like double setup. And so if you look at a new Palisade from the rear end, probably not gonna be able to tell the difference between this and the previous version. Now popping inside, you guys can see here with the whole door panel setup, so we got a little sunshade from the factory, which is definitely a nice feature to have. And really nice material use. Again, this was definitely kind of like a trend setter for this particular segment of SUV, and it kind of pushed a lot of other automakers in the space to definitely bring things up from a material standpoint just because of what they had done. And look at the seats also. So again, it has that cool like quilted design there on the top. You notice the piping on the side of the seats as well. And this is when I was still wearing shorts for reviews. Oh wow. Anyways, you guys can see their space is great. I can easily fit an adult heated cooled seats. You've got your own climate zone there for the back. You've got a bunch of charging ports in the back as well, which is definitely a nice thing to have. And that camera's freaking out. It's like, nope, too much light. And they got a little USB port there. And then you guys can see here with the third row, you got the captain chairs, so you can just slip between those, get into the third row. Just like most SUVs in this segment, though, you typically reserve a third row for kids. Got those little controls there to move these seats, which is pretty cool. And got a little USB port back there as well. Headroom's actually pretty decent in the third row with the Palisade, which is a big plus. But now, with all that taken into account, if we move over to the new one, what you guys will notice here, first off, is look at the, well, first off, got a sunshade still, but look at the trim there on the door panel. Again, everything's in the same place, but just different design theme, right? They've kind of, it looks like they've kind of tried to simplify things from a design perspective to make it look a little bit cleaner with the Palisade, but material use looks pretty much identical. It doesn't look like any nicer compared to the 2022 Palisade. And then you can see here with the seats, same thing, right? They just look a little bit cleaner from a design perspective, but again, material use looks about the same, so it's not like it's an upgrade or a downgrade. All the other features are the same, so that's why we are back to the 2022 Palisade. It's kind of a theme with this video, because again, I want to try to focus on the differences here, but pay close attention to kind of like the trim, a few of the trim pieces here on the door panel, and of course, got our Palisade logo. And then the front seats have that same cool quilted design there at the top with the 2022. And then you guys can see here all the adjustments are on the side of the seat, and then notice with the pedal layout down below. And then you guys can see all these controls like the lane departure, stability control, for example. And then you got your adjustment for the steering wheel, which is manual. Now going from that to the new Palisade, again, that kind of new door panel design carries over here with this, so you guys can see, again, more simplistic with the design there. Definitely looks cool though with that cool like wave design. It reminds me of some Lexus stuff. Then all the controls there, definitely nice with the finish. But again, a lot of carryover. And then this front seats again changed just like the back seats. Let me know which design you guys like more, the new one or the old one in terms of like the little seat design. And then notice your power adjustments, and then I do have massaging seats as well. And then normal pedal layout, they didn't do anything fancy with that. And then notice how the controls there are a little bit different in terms of what you have, so that's kind of interesting. And then see there with the vent, looks pretty cool. Now popping into the 2022 Palisade again, what you guys will want to pay attention to is steering wheel and gauge cluster especially here. But notice the steering wheel design here. This is kind of Hyundai's older design, is the best way to put it. Paddle shifters there on the back. You got controls for like the voice command phone controls. And then you got your adaptive cruise control as well. Definitely a cool system. And then your stocks, again, the stocks are definitely more plasticky with the old Palisade. And then you can see here with the full digital gauge cluster. So I think it looks great, and still looks modern to this day, that is for sure. So cool, you can see there with the all-wheel drive system, and then notice with the drive mode it's showing us in right now, comfort, and then notice how it actually gives us a little animation and changes when you go to a different drive mode. And just, again, like I said, just kind of pay attention to the overall formatting with the different drive modes and with how the gauge cluster looks, because it is a little bit different compared to the new one in terms of how they've stylized everything here with the Palisade. And overall, though, I think that the original one, like, I wouldn't say that they did a bad job by any means. I think that they, especially with the animations, I always thought the animations were pretty cool. Now, infotainment system, this is another thing to slightly pay attention to, but most of it's a carryover, frankly. But you guys can see here with the camera system, so notice in reverse you got all the different camera views, which definitely helps out. It's not a huge SUV, but it's big enough that it's nice to have multiple camera viewpoints with it. And then as for the rest of the infotainment system, or sorry, camera system rather, you guys can see the rest of the 360 views on it. And so literally, again, it's almost like overkill, but it's cool. Now, as for the rest of the infotainment system, as I was saying before, a lot of this is a carryover to the new one in terms of like the functionality and a lot of the features on it, including the passenger talk, which is always a weird feature because it's basically just putting your voice in through the whole like audio system, and it just always sounds interesting. It takes me a second to get used to, but it's nice so you don't have to strain your voice if you have kids in the third row. And it lets you know that's what track is playing right now, passenger talk, which is kind of funny. And then also pay attention kind of to this area with the overall look of the dash, and then also the controls here on the previous version of the Palisade, kind of what they've done from a design perspective, and finishes on a lot of the buttons with it. I always think it's funny, like the hazard light control blinks on top of, like, you know, the lights blinking. Obviously, you got your little climate control section, and then you got your gear selector right there, and then notice there with the whole drive mode select, and then the center locker, and then hill descent control. You got that for like the camera stuff, and then your auto stop start, and then heated cooled seats for the front. So it's cool. The Palisade with, you know, the new one and the old one had heated and cooled seats for the front and for the second row. It's not a very common thing to see in any vehicle, frankly. Even a lot of luxury cars won't have that. And yeah, their whole center console thing is kind of funny. But this is, most of this is carried over, right? Including their over-engineered cup holders, which is so weird. So definitely just, yeah, no, that hasn't changed with the new one. And again, just to reiterate, we're on the 2022 right now, if you guys fell asleep in the middle of this. And going from that to the center console, again, this was another thing kind of like carried over, was this whole setup, which it makes sense. They don't need to redesign a freaking center console. And then you can see with the glove box, decent storage space. And then notice, again, pay attention though, the trim on the dash. That's one thing that you definitely want to pay attention to. Then here's just a better look at the front seat, since the other one had a cover on it. It's cool that they match it front to rear so that you feel like you're having the same experience all throughout the Palisade, instead of having the Ford model of things where you make the rear seats a lot cheaper from a material standpoint compared to the front seats with it. And then notice here at the storage space underneath, that cup holder thing, the first time I discovered that, I was like, this thing's fun to play with. Got little charging ports. Again, that whole thing though, underneath center console area is all carryover as well. And then you guys can see with the sunroof here, so you have a regular sunroof in the front, and then you do have a sunroof, climate controls there in the rear, and then also the sunroof there in the rear. This whole thing's a carryover too to the new one, so this hasn't changed at all in terms of that whole setup. All right, I don't know why I say climate controls, vents there on the top. Anyways, you can see there it functions like a normal sunroof. And then you can also open the shade there for the rear one as well. And it's interesting that even like the headliner's got that premium headliner. It's even on like the cover for the sunroof. A lot of manufacturers won't do that. They'll just do like regular cloth. So it's interesting that Hyundai chose to do the premium stuff on even like the little sunroof thing. I definitely think that's interesting. for sure. But also kind of look at the, pay attention to the kind of like the headliner a little bit. But anyways, popping into the new one. Ooh, got a different little kind of animation there, kind of. But notice the steering wheel completely different. Looks a lot more modern. It's their 2-spoke design. And then the finish on it just looks better. It just definitely makes the vehicle feel more upscale. It's something that's funny with cars is change the steering wheel and it changes the whole vehicle almost. Because again, that's something you stare at all the time. And then also the stocks, right? Those definitely look a lot nicer from a trim piece perspective. And then digital gauge cluster. So you can see different, in terms of the overall aesthetic that they have gone for with the gauge cluster. So functionality's the same. It just looks a little bit different, a little bit more, I would say slightly more modern, but it's not like the old one looked outdated by any means. But notice some of the drive mode animations kind of a carryover. Now the other thing that's kind of weird is it doesn't seem like there's as much in terms of like the looks of the drive mode. So I guess you kind of have lost some of the fun thematic stuff. But notice this whole thing is kind of the same. And then diving into the infotainment system, the only thing I noticed from a camera perspective is that this also has like this cool outside view of it, which is definitely fun. Comment down below if the old one had that too. I feel like it did for some reason. I didn't show it in the other video, but I feel like it did. But if it didn't, then cool that I included this clip in the video so that we can show that. And I'm sure that one of the people that are Hyundai fans will comment on that. And yeah, just like the other one, you have tons of different camera viewpoints. So parking it is not an issue whatsoever. So that's definitely a nice thing to have for the Palisade. And then moving on from that, the rest of the infotainment systems carry over. And then you can see a lot of the stuff with the dash. Again, slightly different design on some of the trim pieces, but most of the dash, right, pretty much a straight carryover. And then you guys can see here, still have the cool little hazard light button. With the climate control down below, look at how the screen's a little bit different. So that changed slightly with the refreshed version of the Palisade. So again, this looks a little bit snazzier, I suppose is the best way to put it. And functionality is kind of weird pressing the screen. It's screens on every single car nowadays. It's like they are just going crazy. That whole area though is the same. So that's why we're skipping from that to the top. But notice nice premium headliner, still have the double sunroof setup, which looks nice, I guess. Right? It's kind of a weird thing to have, but I guess it also kind of makes sense rather than doing a panoramic when you have a third row, so that you can actually get some light to the third row of the SUV. So I guess it's smart, right? But the biggest change, what you guys will notice, other than the fact that sunroof situation same as, again, camera mirror. So this one has it, the other one does not have it. So that's a little bit of a feature change. But yeah, that's a not so quick video showing the differences with the Palisades. Let me know which one you guys would go for and if you think the new one's worth it.